Hello, I'm the widow of Joseph Guy LaPointe Jr. My name is Cindy LaPointe Daffler. We called him Guy. He was killed in Vietnam in 1969, so it's been 50 years. A biography of my late husband has just been published, and we have the author here to speak about it. Linda Swink of Hamilton, Ohio, has written several books, nonfiction as well as fiction, and is also an Air Force veteran. Linda, I remember when you first contacted me back in 2012 after you wrote in their honor. What made you decide to get a hold of me?
Well, I was doing the research for that book, In Their Honor, which is a collection of 524 biographies on men who had military installations named for them. And one of the names that came up was Joseph Guy LaPointe, who had a heliport named for him. And as I was reading through more of the information on him, I thought, oh, he's from Dayton, and his wife is from Dayton. So I thought, gee, I wonder if she's still around. I did a little Google search, and there you were. And I called you, and you were able to give me a lot more information that I had than what I found in the research that I had done. And we've known each other since.
Yes, I remember when you came to the Patriot Freedom Festival that year, and you saw the display that the curator of the museum, Miami Valley Military History Museum, had set up for Guy.
Yeah, that was impressive. That's the first time I had ever seen a Medal of Honor ribbon or medal, and the display that was set up was awesome. It really was very nicely done.
It was exciting to meet you, and within the next months of our friendship, I met some other military writing authors, and we ended up having a military writers book signing there at the museum. That was pretty neat.
That was fun. We did, sold a lot of books that day.
Yeah, I remember going to some of your book launches as well as some of your book signings too. So we enjoyed that. As an Air Force veteran, what drove you to join the military, in particular the Air Force?
Well, I come from a military background. My father was a Marine. He served in World War II, fought in the Battle of Peleliu, a very, very bloody battle, as I understand. All my uncles were in the military, and I just grew up around military talk, and I just knew I had to be military, and since I loved airplanes, it had to be Air Force. And of course I joined the Air Force because I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and unfortunately I discovered I was about 2 decades too soon. I couldn't fly airplanes for the Air Force back then, but they did make me, assign me as a photographer with a reconnaissance photography squadron. So that was very, very interesting.
Wow, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it was. A lot of fun.
So how did you get from photography to becoming a writer?
I didn't plan on it. When I was in the Air Force, they had a TDY slot, which is temporary duty assignment, to a photojournalism school. And when I got there, I discovered that the course was a little bit, well, I had been a photographer for about 20 years, so I knew a little bit about it. And I told the instructor, I said, I think maybe the government's wasting their time sending me to this school because I'm already a photographer. And he said, well, how would you like to go across the hallway to the journalism class? And I went, and I fell in love. I didn't realize that I could write, and I loved to write. And from there, I started writing little pieces for military newspapers wherever my husband was assigned to, because I was married to an Army soldier, career Army soldier. And everywhere we went, I contacted the newspaper on base or on post and wrote for them. And then I wrote for civilian newspapers, and that branched out to commercial and trade magazines. And then I wrote a book.
Oh, you wrote you wrote your first book after that.
I wrote my first book after that.
How did that come about?
Again, I didn't plan on it. I was coming out of the gate at Fort Benjamin Harrison after visiting the commissary, And there it was, Fort Benjamin Harrison. And I thought, I wonder if that's the President, Benjamin Harrison, or was that some soldier who just happened to have the same name? So when I got back home, I researched it, and sure enough, it was the President. Then I began to wonder, who were all these other men who had military installations named for them? And of course, I was stationed at Barksdale and Westover and Lackland. And I was really impressed with the biographies that I was reading. Some of these men were awesome. Many were Medal of Honor recipients, especially in the Marine Corps. And the book just grew from 1 or 2 curiosities to 524 biographies.
You also wrote a biography for General Meckenbauer, Life on a $5 Bet. And that's the first book of yours that I read, actually.
Ah, yeah.
And
very interesting story about a POW.
I know you were surprised when I called you.
I was a bit surprised, and I was honored to think that you would want me to write Guy's story. And I often wondered, why? Why did you pick me?
Well, it's a little bit of a story. I always knew I wanted Guy's stories written. Now, whether I would write it or, find an author to write it, even if it was just for the family. And it was 2 years ago, I believe now. But an author had contacted me about writing Guy's biography, and he had written a biography about a Medal of Honor, a more recent Medal of Honor recipient. So, in the back of my mind, you were always there.
Aww.
But I read his book, or I tried to read his book, and I found myself struggling to get it finished. So I walked in my bedroom one day to make my bed, and there the book lay next to my bed. And I realized I can't read it anymore. And I picked up the phone. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. I remember that vividly. And I said, Linda, I want you to write Guy's biography. Would you do that? And I heard you gasp.
Well, that's probably because it was 8 o'clock in the morning and I was just getting out of bed. Not really. No, it was an honor that you asked, and it has certainly been a privilege to get to know Guy through writing the book.
You did tell me that you didn't sleep that night. But I wanted it written to preserve his memory.
Sure.
He's been an inspiration. It's 50 years now, and he's been an inspiration even in death to so many people. I know because of him, I volunteer and do the things that I do. So that's been really important to me. So can you explain how you got the information for the book and what was your writing process?
Well, to start with a blank page is always a little bit scary, because I thought, how am I going to write a book about a man who doesn't exist? And writing General Meckenbauer's story was easy because I just sat down and talked to him. But with Guy not being here, I had to rely on, fortunately, the names that you gave me, contact information of men who knew him when he was a young child, men who knew him, and I say men and women, who knew him as a teenager and then as an adult, and also the men who fought with him. So, and they were so gracious in giving me their time, answering all my questions, and probing to get more and more information from them. So that was the start. And then talking to you and getting your story helped to round out the whole book.
And we talked all through the process, I know.
We did.
A lot.
A lot.
And the letters from Guy to his father and to his parents, I know that was a big help.
That was the one thing that gave me a real insight as to who Guy was. He wrote very honestly to his father, and it also gave me a look at his sense of humor. Everybody that I talked to, not one person said, or everybody that said, he was a funny person, a gracious person. People loved him, and you can hear somebody else say the words, but till you hear his own words through letters, it became more real. And that was a big help in writing. And I used quite a few of his letters in the book.
That's great. Can you tell me about some of the interviews? Some of them maybe touched you more than others, or?
One of the problems, and I don't know that we talked about this before, was people's memory faded. You know, it was 50 years. And they knew an incident happened, but they didn't know what led up to that. They didn't know what happened afterwards, and some of the details were not clear. So that was a bit of a problem. But after probing more and more, I got more information. But the one gentleman that I interviewed was J.R. Baldessar. He was on the battlefield, and he saw Guy get killed. And that really touched me, that he had to live through that all of his life.
Yes, J.R. is pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was undoubtedly a challenge, just getting through all that.
Yeah, and I had to take their stories and put dialogue to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
writing the dialogue.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, but people had told me that because he had a sense of humor, and I'm a little bit, off in the clouds with my humor. I heard a story told by your sister, Candy, that he had told her the first time she met him, a story about an encyclopedia salesman. And she couldn't remember the story. She said it was so funny. And then you were able to fill in a little bit of information, and I took it from there. Now, writing it became a little bit of a creative nonfiction in doing that, because after all, I had no real dialogue from anyone. So I had to take the scene, the situation, and say, what would Guy have said in this position? And it seemed to work, because everybody that's read the book says, that sounds just like Guy.
Yes.
He would have said that.
Yes, he would make up funny stories,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that was another made-up funny story. The research you had to do for this book was extensive.
It was, having already written 2 books that were military-based, and with General Meckenbeyer's book having been Vietnam, I had a bit of a background already in understanding the geography, the topography, the weaponry and all that. And fortunately, my husband, being an Army veteran, having been in Vietnam for a short time, he was my, what would you say, counsel. He was able to guide me into some of the research that I had to do. But I had to get it right. I mean, I had to get the names, the spellings of the towns, which of course you're looking at a foreign country, and the names and the way they spelled them. There's research, just everything that was said, I had to verify. Was it an M1? Was it an M16? Was it an M60? All the weapons that they used, I had to get that right. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, there's a lot of research going. Even when you're writing fiction, there's a lot of research, because you have to get that right.
Was there anything that surprised you, such as in his letters home? His attitude, you had said something about.
Yeah, that, I didn't realize it until I had already written it. His first letters home were very jolly, very upbeat. He talked about the flora and the fauna, and what they had, how their living conditions, and he made it very light. But as time went on, as time progressed, the letters became a little darker, a little sadder, and then you could tell just by the strain and what he was writing about, he was getting fatigued from the battles, and he had seen a lot of battles, which he never told you about, I understand. You told me that he never told you what he was going through, that he was even in combat.
Yes, he was trying to protect me, and when he wrote letters home, it was lovey-dovey, and this is what we're going to do when I get home, and we want to do this, and so.
And I used that technique in contrast, that he would be talking to his dad in his letters, telling him about all the things that he had got. He got kicked off of a Jeep with the gun turret turned around and knocked him off. But he never told you that.
No.
And so that I had the contrast of his letters to you being jolly and happy, and then the real story that he told to his father.
I know he was trying to protect me.
Yeah.
What parts of writing the book did you really like? I mean, did you learn something new, or?
I learn something new every day, I hope. I know more about lizards and salamanders and snakes than I care to know. But I did come to learn to appreciate owls. You know, Guy said from very young age he knew he wanted to be a naturalist. He wanted to work with nature. He wanted to be a park ranger. He wanted to go to school to be a biologist. And he talked so much about loving owls. He would climb a tree and sit in a branch and stare at them for hours, and they would stare back at him. And I thought, I never thought of an owl that way. And now every time I see an owl, I think of Guy.
Yeah. So in my interviews with you, when you and I talked, I was reliving memories of that time as well. And you drew out memories that I thought I had blocked or maybe even forgotten. But you know, being in shock and from what happened. But it brought back, as you and I talked, I would reveal a memory and then sleep on it, and more would come back. But the fact that when he was killed, our son was just 5 months old, and Guy was supposed to be on a plane to Saigon to fly out to Hawaii instead of being on that hill.
That's the most poignant part of this book, I think. And what I wrestled with how to approach that with you, because I thought, you know, this is something that touched you deeply to get that telegram. The first one being the MIA, that he was missing in action, and you couldn't understand how he could be missing because he was supposed to be working in an aid station. He wasn't supposed to be out on the battlefield. How could he be missing? And you had to live with that for several days before you got the telegram saying that he had been killed. And I didn't know how to approach you. I thought, you know, this is going to be really touchy, but you had lived with it already for 50 years, so you were very, very easy to relay that information to me.
Yes, Guy's stepmother, Mary Lee, had given me all the letters that Guy had written home, and they really opened my eyes to what he had been hiding from me. So, and I had received those, and I copied them, and I typed them out, and so I was well aware of what was really going on by the time you and I talked. So, yeah, we got the MIA, and his dad, I remember, kept saying, well, he knows his way around and he'll be okay, and if he's missing and not captured, he'll be fine. He knows how to survive in the wild. And then the two soldiers, very classic, the two soldiers came to the door with the telegram, I regret to inform you, and it was just gut-wrenching when that happened. I pretty much went in my room, curled up in a fetal position, and it felt like my guts had been ripped out. It was very hard. The other hardest thing that I went through then was letting him go. I mean, when he flew out that last time to go to California, to go to Vietnam, that was bad.
I bet.
That was yeah, that was very hard.
Expecting him that he would be coming home, you know.
Yeah.
And he was in several battles, of course, which you didn't know about at the time. And I have one of them that he talked about in his letters. And in fact, even before that, with the Medal of Honor letter, do you have that you'd like to?
I do. I can read the Silver Star.
The Silver
Yeah, the
Star.
Silver Star.
Yeah.
His Medal of Honor, people can go online and read it all over. But the Silver Star citations are not so accessible. You did publish it, so that was good. He was posthumously awarded the Silver Star, and the citation reads, "For gallantry in action while engaged in military operations involving conflict with an armed hostile force in the Republic of Vietnam on 12 April 1969, Specialist LaPointe distinguished himself while serving as a medical aidman on a combat operation in the A Shau Valley, Republic of Vietnam. As Specialist LaPointe's platoon was moving up a hill to set up a night defensive position, the 3rd Squad fell behind because of several heat casualties. Specialist LaPointe moved to their position to treat the casualties, but before he reached their position, an artillery round impacted near the position of the main body of the platoon. Realizing that there were probably casualties due to the artillery, he rushed to the aid of the fallen comrades. While moving up the hill, 3 more rounds impacted between him and the platoon. Never pausing to take cover, he ran headlong through the bursting artillery to the aid of the wounded. He treated 17 casualties, several of which were severe. He was directly instrumental in saving the life of 1 man, and his quick thinking and expert treatment prevented the possible loss of more lives. Specialist LaPointe's personal bravery and devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. And then I got to read his letter home. Would you read that?
It's interesting to notice how the military writes so official in their explanation. And this is his letter home about the same incident to his dad. 15 April, dear Pop, a lot has happened in the past couple days. Last night we were hit by our own mortars. No one was injured or killed, but the day before yesterday was different. The Cav lost 4 men and had 30 men wounded. We left Camp Eagle on the 9th to spend time 15 miles from the DMZ. The temperature was reaching 101 degrees in the shade, if we had any, and some of the men were having a hard time making it up the hill. I was making my way to help 16 stragglers who were suffering from heat exhaustion when 4 artillery rounds exploded near them. They had been in country 2 weeks. Everyone was yelling at them to get down and to take cover, but they sat up and looked around. They had to see what was going on, I suppose. And I kept yelling, get down, incoming, but they wouldn't listen. I watched as they got hit and bodies went flying everywhere. I grabbed my medical bag and took off toward them and almost got shot myself in the process when more rounds exploded around me. I was the only medic and was overwhelmed trying to treat them all. Some had head wounds, one had an arm blown off, another a leg. Pop, it was awful. I managed to get to each one and did what I could, which wasn't enough. One of the injured died on the medevac helicopter on the way back. One guy had a nervous breakdown. It was terrible. Just think. These guys were still in training and didn't know what to do under fire. And more of the bodies were badly mutilated. The entire squad was wiped out. It was sickening. Imagine what he saw. And the worst part was discovering that the rockets came from our own military artillery. The platoon leader of Company A, 506 Infantry, didn't tell anybody where our position was. And since we were observed in an area known for the NVA regiment, we were mistaken for the enemy. Anyway, after it was over, I collapsed from exhaustion. But here I am, still in the field. Someone said we're going back to camp on the 17th or 18th, whenever that is. Bye for now. Don't worry. I'm okay. Tell Cindy I'm fine because I'm out of paper and I haven't written to her, and I won't get a chance for a while. Your son, Guy. And a little bit later, several days later, he writes in a postscript to his dad, P.S. There's a rumor I'm supposed to get some kind of medal for what I did on the hill, April 12th. Medals don't mean much when you're getting shot at. And that was his attitude toward it all. He was really a special, special person.
Yes. I remember receiving Fernando de Perez was the helicopter pilot. He was the captain of the helicopter units. I'm not totally familiar with all the jargon, but he wrote me an email and he said that action happened on the hill later known, about 2 weeks later, known as Hamburger Hill.
Right, and you hear all about that, but you don't hear about the other battles that went on.
Well, yes, that was the battle for Hamburger Hill is the one that made the news.
Yeah. I understand that when you got a phone call from Fernando,
yeah.
kind of changed your life in a way.
It did. For the first 30 years, almost 30 years, I really didn't talk about Guy or anything. Nobody asked, and of course, you know, when he was killed, you didn't mention it. Otherwise, you know, the person that had served would be accused of terrible things. So there wasn't that many people interested in hearing about it, and I think I think in our society we have a problem talking to people who have lost a loved one, and I hope that's changing now. But Fernando contacted Mary Lee, and she gave me his number, and I called him, and we talked for a long time. He invited us to the B Troop reunion, which was taking place in 1998. And that was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So it was 3 days, and my son, my sister, Guy's sister, Robin, we all went. We met everybody. And at the end of, when we were all saying goodbye, Fernando said, "Have you ever thought about going back to Vietnam?"
And you went?
Well, my son Joe, he practically leaped out of his skin. Yes, yes, yes. And actually, I wanted to go when Guy went there. So
Yeah.
absolutely, I wanted to go. We needed to go see where he was killed. And I explain it as when you're driving down the road and you see a cross on the side of the road, you know that friends and family have marked the spot where their loved one has perished. We needed to go see that spot for ourselves as well. That trip was a life changer. Fernando got me talking, and he told me things. He told me one story, which was confirmed by a letter from Guy, that they were going on a mission, and he got in a helicopter and the gunner wasn't there. I don't know what happened to the gunner, but there was no gunner. And they were being attacked. They were going into a hot landing zone, and they were being shot at, and Guy jumped behind the gun and he started firing. He was suppressing the fire coming up from the ground. And I guess Fernando kind of teased him about that afterwards, but as Guy said in his letter, you know, what was I to do? I had to do that.
That had to be hard for him, being a conscientious objector, because he made it very clear he did not want to kill anyone.
Exactly. So I'm very impressed that he set aside his own very serious convictions in order to protect those others on the helicopter and get them down to the landing zone so they could do the rescue.
Yeah, because without them helping the others, if they had been shot down and killed, he couldn't have helped.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
So I was impressed by that.
Yeah. What happened on the hill when you went back? What all the things that did you see, and did you see the place where he was killed?
Yes, we got to that place. There was actually, this was in 1999, so it was 30 years after the battle. And JR was with us, JR Baltazar. There was a camera crew with us as well. Kurt Jensen, another B trooper, he lives in Fargo, North Dakota, and he knows, well, it's a smaller city, but he knows the producer or the owner of the TV station there. So they sent a crew, and so it was filmed, and it's called Return to Vietnam, Healing on the Hill.
Healing.
So they filmed us going up the hill, and it wasn't supposed to be just about Guy, it was supposed to be about the whole B Troop. So there was 18 of us that climbed the hill, and we got to the top of the hill after a 3-hour hike.
3 hours?
in 100-degree heat.
Wow.
Yeah, that was an experience, quite an experience, all these out-of-shape Americans trying to climb up this hill. And one of the things I remember vividly was this little Vietnamese lady, tiny little Vietnamese lady, and she was running up and down the hill. I mean, we saw her 3 or 4 times up and down the hill, and she was collecting wood to sell for firewood down in the village at the foot of the hill. So we got up there, JR climbed up on a rock, and this was the rock that we were hiding behind, and he told the story, and it was quite. I mean, there was a lot of tears.
He gave me a lot of information. I couldn't digest it at first. I couldn't write it. I could not write that scene. I had to write it over and over and over. And not to interrupt you, but I wanted to say, when he did tell me, and he was so gracious in telling me that story, and I thought, how can this man tell that story, having lived it and seeing men get killed? How can he tell it to me like that? But he did. And anyway, I wrote the story and I sent it back to him. I said, is this correct? And he said, no, Linda, you got it wrong. Because it was so complicated what was going on. I mean, there was bombs going off and mortars going off and machine guns, and then there was hand grenades and all the sounds and the smells and the men shouting at each other. Oh my.
And JR was 17 years old.
Can you imagine?
And he did receive the Silver Star for his actions on that day on the Hill. So yeah, it affected the whole squad, the whole unit that day. And the battle went on. There was a relief troop that came, and the battle went on for several days.
I understand that there were 4 other men that were killed also?
There was 5 killed right away.
Yeah.
Guy was trying to protect 2 others, and the 3 of them were killed by a grenade, and then there was 2 others that were shot and killed right away. A lot of injuries too. Yeah, a leg lost here.
And he made rubbings of the names. He went to
Fernando did.
Yeah.
He went to Washington D.C. and he made rubbings of the 5 that were killed. So when we got up on the hill, we climbed up on a rock and we had a little ceremony. And Joe read off the name. My son Joe read off the names, and I burned them. Somebody handed me a lighter, and I burned them, and JR was helping me because the wind was coming up, the clouds were building. It was like an offering to the gods to let these souls rest in peace. So when we were done, we wandered around a little bit, and then we started back down the hill. It seemed like suddenly everyone was gone. My sister and my son and I were left there, and it started to rain just as it did 30 years before. And Candy said, can we sing taps? So Candy and Joe and I stood in the rain looking at the hill singing taps. And boy, we felt such a pull. Such a pull. I asked Joe at one point, what would you do if I was having trouble making it? He said, I would have grabbed you by the hair and pulled you up the hill.
It meant that much to him.
It did.
That's
It
probably
did.
the
It
first-
changed his life as well as mine. So, yeah.
He never got to meet his father.
No. And he got to know him through these others. And that meant so much to him. And it was a growing experience for him. It was a healing experience for all of us.
What is so poignant about the story is that he was just hours away from getting on a helicopter to meet you for R&R in Hawaii and to see his son for the first time.
Yeah, but he did not want to leave B Troop without a medic. The medic that was supposed to show up, the helicopter that was supposed to bring him broke down, so he couldn't come.
Well,
yeah,
that happens. Well, I understand all these years you've been keeping his memory alive, and he's had several installations and places named for him.
Yes.
In his honor.
And I have to say, we, the family, we never instituted any of this. It's all been others who were inspired by him that pushed for these honors. There's been 8 installations, including buildings, housing complexes, and roads, and just to name a few locally. Well, one of them is the heliport at Fort Benning that you mentioned. But the U.S. Army Medical Training Center in Fort Sam, Houston was named for him. The U.S. Army Reserve Training Center locally was named for him. It's at the corner of the Air Force Base at Airway and Woodman.
Oh, right here in Dayton.
Right here in Dayton.
Okay.
The LaPointe Memorial Highway, which is Route 49. It's from 3rd Street to I-70 in Trotwood and Clayton. the new Trotwood connector, and the Dayton VA Medical Center's Guy LaPointe Auditorium, which was just dedicated June 3rd.
Yeah.
Also, there is a fund at Sinclair in his name, so I appreciate that.
Mm. Well, Cindy, I have to tell you, I am so very honored and pleased to have written in, they called him Doc, Joseph Guy LaPointe's book. It's been an honor and certainly a pleasure to know you and to get to know Guy through all the stories that I've heard.
And where can people get this book?
It is available on Amazon, both in paperback form and electronic ebook. And of course, you and I will be doing some book signings here and there throughout, so people need to just watch the news and for the announcements.
Okay. Well, I thank you for watching our program about my late husband, Joseph Guy LaPointe Jr., and his biography, written by Linda Swink. And this is a continuing effort on my part to preserve his memory. Thank you.